Hey guys, tonight we're going to ignite a fire in your imagination. Literally, you're going to slide beneath the polished hood of a supercar and into the heart of its roaring, unpredictable soul, the internal combustion engine. You'll feel the rush of gasoline vapor mixing with air, the sudden spark, the thunderclap of energy released, and you'll realize something chilling. You're riding on a controlled explosion. Every time you touch the gas, you're lighting a match inside a metal chamber, over and over, hundreds of times per minute. You probably won't survive this, at least not in the same way you look at cars again. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know where you're listening from and what time it is there. I always read the comments, even if I sound asleep. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're laying in bed, your eyelids getting heavier. In the background, you hear the faint hum of your ceiling fan. It mimics the spinning of a crankshaft. You imagine lying beneath the hood of a bright red Ferrari 812 Superfast. Its V12 engine, still ticking with heat after a brutal track run. There's a weird poetry to it, isn't there? A luxury car's engine is, at its core, a furnace. It starts with fuel, air, and spark, primitive ingredients, like a caveman's fire, but turned into precise mechanical dance. A supercar isn't magical. It's just really good at managing explosions. The gasoline or petrol is sprayed into a chamber with compressed air. Then a spark plug, basically a glorified lighter, ignites the mix. Boom, a tiny explosion. That blast pushes a piston down. That piston's motion turns a crankshaft. The crankshaft spins your wheels. You move. Simple, elegant, unhinged. Every time you accelerate, you're commanding this system to perform thousands of explosions per minute. A V8 engine fires 4 times every revolution. At 6,000 revolutions per minute, that's 24,000 explosions a minute. And you wonder why it sounds like thunder wrapped in sex appeal. What makes it all work isn't just the boom, but how the heat from that combustion turns into motion. That's the domain of thermodynamics. Specifically the first law: energy can't be created or destroyed, only transformed. The chemical energy in the fuel becomes heat, the heat becomes pressure, and pressure becomes force on the piston. But here's the catch: most of that heat is wasted. Around 70% of it just disappears. It escapes through your exhaust, or is soaked up by your engine block, or radiates uselessly into the air. You're driving a machine where most of the energy is burned for nothing. Ferrari, Lamborghini, Bugatti, they all suffer from the same inefficiency. That's where our story begins, in a beautiful failure. Picture yourself watching a slow-motion video of combustion. It looks almost graceful, like fire dancing in a glass box. But it's not. It's violent, chaotic, and riddled with compromise. You have to compress the air-fuel mix just enough, not too much, or it pre-ignites. You need the spark at exactly the right moment, not a second off, or you lose power. And the temperature inside that cylinder, try 2,500 degrees Celsius, hot enough to melt aluminum. Toast your valves and cook your oil into tar. That's why your car has radiators, oil coolers, thermal shielding. Everything under the hood is about not dying from the fire you've asked it to summon. You're not just driving. You're constantly one bad cooling decision away from a seized engine. Scientists still argue whether we've hit the thermodynamic limit of combustion engines. Can we squeeze more power out of less fuel? Can we lower emissions while boosting performance? The answer might be yes, but it might also be not without rewriting physics. The fun part: this entire system starts with you turning a key or pressing a button. That's it. One press, and your car wakes up like a dragon that somehow learned table manners. You don't hear it scream and protest, but you should. It's not a calm purr. It's a tightly suppressed mechanical panic. Now imagine doing that in a Lamborghini Huracan. You feel the entire car tremble as it comes to life. The engine doesn't start. It bursts awake. You've woken a beast, not just an engine. And it's all because a spark ignited a flammable vapor. Let that settle in as you breathe out. Let's talk about the fuel itself. Gasoline isn't magical. It's just a dense energy source. 1 gallon contains roughly 33.7 kilowatt hours of energy. That's more energy than you'd use watching Netflix for 30 hours straight, all packed into something the size of a milk jug. But gasoline isn't just about energy. It's about how fast and violently that energy can be released. High-octane fuel resists knocking. It can be compressed more before it explodes. That's why supercars don't just use premium gas for show. They need it. Lower octane fuel would detonate early and destroy the engine. You lie there, and you think this is what we've done for over a century. Take dead dinosaurs, refine them, compress them and make them explode. Over and over. Just so you can roll up to Starbucks in 3.1 seconds. Somewhere in your memory you picture that Ferrari again. Engine idling, exhaust ticking, radiator fans humming. The hood is closed now. The beast is back in its cage. You wonder how something so brutal could feel so refined. Here's a fringe idea. Internal combustion engines are mechanical symphonies, not just machines. Listen closely. Each component is an instrument. Pistons are percussion. Intake valves are wind instruments. The timing chain is the metronome. The exhaust is your amp. It's physics, yes, but also performance. That's why Ferrari tunes their exhaust notes like composers. It's not an accident. The crescendo of revs, the sudden bark at 5,000 revolutions per minute, that subtle whine of the turbo, it's designed to make you feel something. And maybe, just maybe, it's designed to help you forget how much energy you're wasting every second it runs. As you start to drift off, let your mind settle on this one truth. Every supercar, no matter how sleek, fast, or loud, is powered by a very old idea. Take heat, turn it into motion. Try not to let it destroy you in the process. Tomorrow we'll look deeper into the madness. Because you're still only riding the surface. That engine isn't just a furnace. It's a carefully tuned bomb that you're using to chase dopamine, and you haven't even hit second gear yet. You're still in bed. The soft hiss of your fan now fading into something deeper, like the growl of an engine revving in a tunnel. It's distant, but steady, and beneath it, the realization is growing. You're riding a bomb. That's not just poetic exaggeration. That's engineering honesty. The internal combustion engine, especially the high-performance monsters in Ferraris and Lamborghinis, isn't some calm, logical mechanism. It's a firestorm, repeating itself dozens of times per second, jagging not to tear itself apart. Imagine sitting on top of a canister of gasoline. Add compressed air. Now light it. Do it again and again at 8,500 revolutions per minute. The fact that your car doesn't fly into pieces every time you accelerate is kind of absurd. It's all thanks to tolerances measured in microns, metals forged in volcanic furnaces, and oil systems designed like intravenous drips for machines. You cruise down the road, not with safety, but with controlled chaos, and it all comes down to explosions. The heart of any engine is combustion. But combustion isn't a gentle burn. It's a detonation in a tiny space. Fuel and air mix inside a cylinder. And at just the right moment, a spark ignites the whole thing. The pressure rises instantly, shoving the piston down with force that would terrify you if it weren't so contained. And that piston, it connects to a crankshaft, which rotates and ultimately turns your wheels. It's a beautiful loop of energy, violent, precise, and completely invisible to the driver. But you're not just lighting fuel, you're performing a dance of timing. The air-fuel ratio has to be perfect. The ignition timing has to be exact. The temperature must stay within razor-thin margins. Even slight variations can lead to knocking. A misfire so violent it can crack pistons like eggshells. That's why modern performance engines use sensors everywhere. There are knock sensors, oxygen sensors, temperature sensors, and camshaft position sensors, all feeding data to the car's brain in milliseconds. The ECU, or engine control unit, constantly adjusts variables to keep the bomb from going rogue. And Ferraris, Lamborghinis, they push the limits. A Lamborghini V10 fires like it's angry at physics itself. Each cylinder ignites sequentially, but at high RPM, the explosions blur into one continuous roar. It's not just speed, it's rhythm, it's percussion, it's chaos, singing harmony. Here's the unromantic truth. Every time you press the gas pedal, you're inviting disaster. The pistons are moving so fast, they're practically skating on a film of oil. The temperatures inside the combustion chamber spike past 2000 degrees Celsius. The pressures are intense enough to deform steel, if unmanaged. So how does it all survive? Metallurgy, mainly. The pistons are often forged aluminum alloys, lightweight and heat-resistant. The crankshaft, usually steel, heat-treated and balanced to perfection. The cylinder walls, sometimes lined with exotic materials like Nicosil or plasma coatings, to reduce friction and wear. And oil. Never underestimate oil. Your car's engine is bathed in oil, pumped constantly through tiny galleries. It cools, lubricates, and cleans. Without it, friction would turn your engine into a solid block of fused metal in under a minute. Here's something quirky. The oil system in a Lamborghini Huracan doesn't use a standard pan. It uses a dry sump system. That means the oil isn't just sitting in a bowl under the engine. It's pumped into a reservoir and actively managed, even under heavy G-forces on a racetrack. Yes, your car has a blood pressure system. And yet, with all that tech, you're still trusting a process that, at its core, is barely controlled violence. Think about it. Most consumer products, phones, fridges, laptops, are fragile and demand gentle handling. Your engine is the exact opposite. It invites abuse. It wants to scream. It dares you to redline it. It's designed to explode and survive, but only just. And then there's the rev limiter. You probably think the red line on a tachometer is just a suggestion. It's not. It's a cliff. Full rev too far past it, and the pistons might outrun the valves, leading to a valve float or even piston-to-valve contact. That's when metal meets metal in a way that's terminal. You're lulled into comfort by soft seats and air conditioning, but you're really riding a machine that operates on the edge of mechanical suicide. Ferrari engines, for example, are redlined with surgical precision. The Ferrari 812 superfast revs to 8,900 revolutions per minute. That means its pistons are traveling over 25 meters per second. For comparison, that's about the speed of a bullet from a paintball gun inside your engine, and they do it thousands of times a minute. It's physics holding hands with madness. Now let's get a little conspiratorial. You've heard of engine break-in periods, right? The idea that you need to drive gently for the first 1,000 kilometers or so. Some say it's outdated. Others say it's critical. Scientists still argue whether the break-in actually affects long-term performance, or whether modern engines are already broken in at the factory. But if you've ever bought a supercar, you'll know Ferrari still recommends it. Maybe it's caution, maybe it's superstition, or maybe, just maybe, it's the engine's way of saying, treat me nice, until I've figured out how to contain my rage. There's something intimate about all this. You and the machine. You're asking it to do violence for you, and in return you promise to feed it clean oil and premium fuel. A fair deal, really. Here's another odd detail. The explosion doesn't happen in the center of the cylinder. It's asymmetrical. The spark plug is off-center. The flame front travels in a wave. Engineers design combustion chambers to optimize this wave, to smooth it out, to make the burn complete. Well, you don't want leftover fuel. That's waste. Worse, it's pollution. So yes, your car is doing chemistry while you sleep on the gas. But that flame front, it's unpredictable. A tiny change in air pressure, humidity, or temperature can alter it. That's why high-performance engines are finicky. 1 degree too hot, knock. Slightly too rich, soot. 1 bad sensor, catastrophic misfire. And yet, you still do it. You still press the pedal, because it feels good. The surge, the sound, the sense of power. You're not just moving, you're commanding explosions. The road rolls beneath you like it's bowing to your machine. But the machine is always seconds from breaking. That's the thrill. That's the seduction. You're balancing on a knife made of fire and timing chains. And as you drift further into sleep, here's a closing thought. The engine doesn't care. It doesn't love you. It's not loyal. It's just following thermodynamic orders. Burn fuel. Make heat. Survive. If it breaks, it breaks. But until it does, you're the king of the road. The fan in your room is still humming. But now it sounds different. Not quite like an engine anymore. More like a whisper of heat escaping through a vent. That's fitting, because tonight, heat is the villain. You've already made peace with the idea that your car runs on explosions. But what you haven't faced yet is this. Most of the power those explosions could give you is lost, not stolen. Not misplaced, just wasted. In a typical internal combustion engine, only about 25 to 30% of the energy in the fuel actually goes toward moving the car. The rest, it becomes heat. Not useful heat, not warm my feet on the dashboard heat. Useless, hostile, thermodynamic trash. Let's put this in perspective. You pour a gallon of premium fuel into your Lamborghini Aventador. That gallon holds over 120 megajoules of chemical energy. But the engine only converts a fraction of that into mechanical power. The rest radiates out as heat through the exhaust, the engine block, the coolant, and even the tires. You're not driving a car. You're driving a very elaborate heater that happens to roll, and managing that heat, keeping it from frying your valves, warping your pistons, or setting your oil on fire, is the real engineering challenge. The engine isn't just a machine, it's a battlefield between energy and entropy. Here's the sad truth. The more powerful the engine, the more heat it produces. That Ferrari V12, it's a furnace dressed in carbon fiber. Every horsepower comes with a thermal tax. So let's talk cooling. Your car has a radiator. Seems simple, right? Just a big metal box with fins. But it's more like a heat exorcist. Coolant, usually a mix of water and ethylene glycol, flows through the engine, soaking up heat like a sponge. It then passes through the radiator, where air strips the heat away. This process repeats constantly, as long as the engine runs. But it's not just about moving liquid around. The thermostat decides when coolant flows. If the engine's too cold, it holds the coolant back, keeping the engine in its optimal temperature range. Too hot, it opens up, flooding the radiator and the fans. They kick in like bouncers at a nightclub, pushing airflow over the fins when you're idling at a red light. It's a symphony of temperature management. If any part of that dance falters, your engine overheats. The oil thins. The metal expands. Eventually, things seize, sometimes spectacularly. Engineers have come up with some clever tricks to help. Heat shields deflect radiant energy. Ceramic coatings reduce heat absorption. Even exhaust manifolds are designed not just to channel gases, but to avoid hot spots. Still, you can't win. Heat is relentless. Even your brakes get in on the act. Every time you stop, kinetic energy turns into thermal energy. Those glowing rotors you see in racing footage, that's not special effects. That's friction burning. Some cars, like Ferraris, now use carbon ceramic brakes, exotic materials that handle heat better. But even then, you're just managing loss, not defeating it. There's a quirky little piece of trivia here. In some modern supercars, the vents you see on the body aren't there for looks. They're functional. The sharp lines, the ducts, the scoops, all tuned in wind tunnels to channel cool air exactly where it's needed. It's not styling, it's survival. You might see a Lamborghini Huracan and think, wow, it looks like a stealth fighter. But every inch of that aggressive design has a purpose. Cooling the brakes, feeding air into the radiators, letting hot air escape the engine bay. Because inside that carbon fiber beauty is a battle, a war between combustion and cooling, speed versus safety, heat against everything. Scientists still argue whether we'll ever break through the thermal efficiency ceiling. Some say new materials, like graphene or exotic ceramics, could help. Others think it's about combustion timing and pressure ratios. A few believe the only way forward is to give up on combustion entirely. But here's where it gets ironic. Despite all the tech, all the heat-resistant materials, and all the finely tuned coolant flows, the engine is still losing. Entropy always wins. The second law of thermodynamics guarantees that not all energy can be converted to useful work. Some of it will always go to waste. That's not a flaw. That's the rule book. And yet, you press the gas anyway. Because even if you're only using a third of the energy, it feels like magic. The surge, the growl, the way the car throws your spine back into the seat. Ooh. You're not thinking about exhaust temperature or coolant viscosity. You're thinking, this is power. And it is. But it's also heat, desperately trying to escape. There's something poetic about it. You're piloting a machine that fights against the natural order just to move forward. Every acceleration is a defiance, every downshift a refusal. You know it's not sustainable, you know it's not efficient, but it feels alive, and feeling alive is worth the waste. Here's a fun side note. The exhaust pipes of high-performance cars get so hot they can glow red. In fact, under full throttle, some Lamborghinis will shoot actual flames out of the exhaust. It's not just drama, it's unburnt fuel igniting in the tailpipe, pushed through by aggressive fuel mapping. Oh, it's a pyrotechnic tantrum, and it looks amazing on Instagram. But that's not just flash, it's thermodynamics on display. Heat that didn't get converted into motion now becomes fire for your entertainment. Ferrari even tunes their exhaust sounds based on heat. As the engine warms, the tone changes, deeper, throatier, more resonant. You're not just hearing metal, you're hearing combustion resonance, shaped by thermal expansion and exhaust velocity. And then there's the turbo. We'll get to that more in another section, but spoiler, turbos exist because of heat. They use the energy in the hot exhaust gases to spin a turbine that compresses intake air. It's like stealing from the fire and giving back to the explosion. Brilliant, reckless, absolutely genius. So now you know the truth. When you drive a Ferrari or a Lamborghini, you're not just driving fast. You're bleeding energy into the air with every second. You're lighting a fire you can never fully control. And that fire is constantly trying to destroy the machine you've begged to contain it. But somehow, it works. The radiator hums. The coolant flows. The oil spins through tiny veins. Heat seeps out of vents and fins and underbody channels. The car exhales just enough to live another mile. And you grin. You shift gears. You chase more fire. Even though you know you're riding with a villain, you're drifting now, half asleep. But your mind's caught in the hum of moving pistons. You're floating through carbon fiber tunnels. every breath tinged with the faint smell of burnt fuel. And somewhere deep in this dream, sitting quietly in the back of your brain like an old French ghost, is a man named Nicolas Léonard Sade Carnot. Yeah, don't worry. We're not doing a full history lesson, but you need to know this. Carnot basically decided how fast your Ferrari can go, or more precisely, how efficient it can ever be. Not because he built engines, but because he studied heat. Back in 1824, Carnot laid out a simple truth in thermodynamics. No engine can ever be 100% efficient. Ever. Not now. Not with future tech. Not even in your wildest cyberpunk dream garage. Why? Because some of the heat in any process will always be lost, usually to surroundings that weren't invited to the party. This limit became known as the Carnot efficiency, and it depends entirely on two temperatures: the heat source, that'd be your combustion chamber, and the heat sink, usually your coolant and radiator. The bigger the temperature difference, the better your engine performs. But there's a ceiling, always a ceiling. So when you hear someone say, a modern gasoline engine is 30% efficient, you now know that's not just bad, it's inevitably bad. The best case scenario, even in a lab, is somewhere around 60–70%. That's if you had no mechanical losses, no friction, perfect combustion, and magic unicorn fuel, which you don't. Even Ferrari doesn't. Still, Ferrari doesn't care, because while Carnot haunts the chalkboards of physicists, Maranello's engineers care about something else. Feel, sound, emotion. The kind of sensation that makes your palms sweat before the engine even starts. You're not buying efficiency, you're buying drama. That said, Carnot's ghost is still there, lurking in the background of every engineering decision. The hotter the combustion, the more pressure generated. Oh! More pressure means more force on the piston. More force equals more torque. But if your heatsink can't keep up, the engine overheats. So now you've got to beef up the cooling system. But that adds weight, which slows you down. So you lighten the frame. But that reduces thermal insulation. It's like thermodynamic whack-a-mole. This is why performance engineering is less about raw power and more about energy management. You're balancing multiple failure points, each threatening to throw the whole system into meltdown. You ever wonder why supercars rev so high? All why they don't just make giant low-revving engines with the same horsepower? It's partly because of power density, the ability to extract more work from the same displacement by revving faster. But it's also about timing the heat. When you spin the engine faster, you can generate smaller, more frequent combustion pulses, each a bit easier to cool. High RPMs mean less time per explosion, which weirdly makes heat management slightly easier, in theory, sort of. Let's not pretend this is clean science. Engineers still argue whether high-revving designs are the best way to balance power and durability. Some say forced induction, like turbos, is better. Others point to hybrids. But one thing they all agree on: you can't cheat thermodynamics. You can only dance with it. Now let's take a moment and visualize this dance. You're sitting in a Ferrari SF90 Stratal hybrid, 986 horsepower. The engine is a twin-turbo V8, assisted by 3 electric motors. You push the start button. Nothing happens. Then the screen lights up, quietly. The electric motors hum to life. No drama. It feels sterile. But then, with a twitch of your ankle, you touch the throttle, and the V8 combusts awake. The cabin shakes, your stomach clenches, and Carnot's rolling in his grave, watching you dump another 70% of your fuel's energy into the atmosphere for a shot of dopamine. You're not maximizing energy. You're maximizing effect. And here's a fun fringe fact. Ferrari's engineers intentionally engineer inefficiency into their engines, not to waste fuel, but to create character. That distinctive growl, that unpredictable rasp. Some of it comes from tuned exhaust lengths that aren't optimized for airflow, from valve overlap settings that prioritize sound over efficiency. Your supercar is misbehaving on purpose. Even the imperfections in combustion, minute flame front asymmetries, exhaust scavenging losses, slight timing deviations, they're not always corrected. Sometimes they're amplified. Why? Because perfect is boring and imperfect feels alive. Here's something else to keep you up. Some engines run hotter than they should by design. Lamborghini's naturally aspirated first 10 runs hotter than its competitors. That heat gives it responsiveness, keeps the engine on edge. Well, it's more work for the cooling system, sure, but the payoff is a throttle that reacts like a nervous predator. You can't fake that with software. And now we circle back to Carnot. Well, because here's the most ironic part of all this. The same principles he outlined in the 1800s are now guiding software simulations for future engine development. Engineers run billions of heat exchange calculations per second, trying to outwet entropy just long enough to squeeze a few more kilowatts out of the same sad fuel. But they're still losing, and they know it. Here's something poetic in a way. Your car's radiator is a shrine to Carnot. Every bit of heat it bleeds off into the air is proof of his theory. The fact that your hood is hot after driving, that's Carnot whispering, "I told you so." Even in electric cars, the ghost of thermodynamics lingers. Batteries heat up. Motors generate waste heat. Cooling loops are still there, still doing the dance. So maybe you don't escape this system, not even in the future, but you can ride it. And if you're lucky enough to ride it in a Ferrari, wrapped in Alcantara, bathed in that mid-engine warmth, you'll understand inefficiency can be beautiful. You take a deep breath, the fan hums on. You feel the warmth in your sheets, like engine heat just settling after a long drive. You're not going anywhere now. But in your mind, you're screaming down an alpine pass. The tack needle flirting with the red. You're losing energy every second. But God, it's worth it. The road in your dream is tightening now, twisting into sharper turns. The engine's sound bouncing off the imaginary walls around you like a war cry. You're not just moving anymore. You're participating. And to understand what you're feeling through that throttle, we need to break down the dirtiest sounding but most elegant little phrase in the automotive world. Suck, squeeze, bang, blow. Yes, that's actually what it's called. No, engineers didn't come up with a classier name, because honestly, it's perfect. This is the 4-stroke cycle, the beating heart of most internal combustion engines. It's been around since the late 1800s and powers everything from lawnmowers to Lamborghinis. And once you understand it, you'll never listen to an engine the same way again. So here it is, step by step like a perfectly timed breath, repeated thousands of times per minute. Suck, also called the intake stroke. The piston moves down, creating a vacuum in the cylinder. The intake valve opens, and the air-fuel mixture is sucked in. Imagine inhaling sharply through your nose before a sprint. That's your engine getting ready to explode. With class. Squeeze. The compression stroke. The intake valve closes. The piston rises, compressing the air-fuel mixture. Pressure builds. The molecules are jammed together tightly, agitated, waiting. It's that tight silence before lightning strikes. Bang. This is the power stroke, and it's the fun part. The spark plug fires. The compressed air-fuel mix detonates. Boom. Pressure explodes against the piston crown, forcing it downward with enough force to snap steel. If not for clever design, this is the only stroke that actually produces power. Everything else is either setup or cleanup. Blow. Finally, the exhaust stroke. The exhaust valve opens. The piston rises again, pushing the burnt gases out of the chamber. It's the exhale, the sigh, the reset before it all starts again. Suck, squeeze, bang, blow, over and over, hundreds of times a second. In your Lamborghini Huracan, which has a 10-cylinder engine revving at 8,000 revolutions per minute. This cycle happens 40,000 times every minute. That's 666 times per second. The devil really is in the details. Here's a juicy mainstream fact for your mental toolbox. Only one of those 4 strokes actually gives you usable energy. The rest, necessary choreography. You burn fuel, release energy, and spend most of your time cleaning up the mess. This is why you're never getting 100% out of your fuel. The other strokes cost energy, moving air, compressing gases, expelling exhaust. It's a cycle of balance, where power is made in bursts, but paid for in quiet labor. Now picture this cycle from the engine's perspective. It's not gentle, it's not romantic, it's violent. The piston hits top dead center, reverses direction, slams down, only to be shoved back up again. It accelerates and decelerates with every single stroke. No easing in, just whiplash after whiplash. And yet it works. Pistons don't just go up and down, they oscillate. Their acceleration at top and bottom is near zero, but in the middle, insane speeds. At redline, a piston can be moving at over 25 meters per second, faster than most Olympic sprinters, and that's inside a tube, the size of a coffee mug. To survive that, they need oil. So thin it looks like water, and metal so strong, it laughs at temperature swings of 800 degrees Celsius. And somehow, they do it, again and again, for years, until one day they don't. Engineers still debate whether adding more cylinders improves longevity, or just complexity. 8 is common. 10 feels exotic. 12. That's engine royalty. The reason for more cylinders is partly power, but also smoothness. More explosions per revolution means a more balanced, silkier output. A V12 doesn't just roar. It sings, but that musicality comes at a cost. More moving parts, more friction, more chances for something to go wrong. That's why Ferrari V12s are expensive to maintain. You're not just servicing an engine, you're performing maintenance on a mechanical orchestra. And let's not forget valve timing. Each cylinder has intake and exhaust valves, operated by camshafts that spin in sync with the crankshaft. The timing of those valves opening and closing is everything. Too early, you lose compression. Too late, you risk backfire. Modern engines now use variable valve timing to adjust this choreography dynamically. Flanksing. 1 millisecond. Think of it like jazz. Improvised, adaptive, but still rooted in strict structure. There's a quirky offshoot to all this valve overlap, where both intake and exhaust valves are open for a tiny moment. It allows for better cylinder scavenging, cleaning out burnt gases, but it can also cause engine lope, that deep, uneven, idle sound hot rodders love. It's inefficiency, engineered for soul. You're lying there, still maybe curled into your blanket like a piston at bottom dead center. Everything feels rhythmic. The soft fan, your breathing, your heartbeat. Now imagine your body running on this 4-stroke loop. Inhale, compress, ignite, exhale. It's meditation by way of combustion. And here's the controversial part. The 4-stroke engine might not be the future. Electric motors are quieter, simpler, and far more efficient. They don't suck or squeeze or bang. They just spin, instantly, smoothly, coldly. Scientists still argue whether this is progress or betrayal. Because while EVs offer silence and sustainability, they lack character. The romance of combustion, the feeling of an engine coming alive, not just turning on. The vibration through the chassis, the heat in your spine, the explosion you control with your toe. The 4-stroke engine is flawed, inefficient, brutal, but it feels human, and maybe that's why it's so hard to let go. So as you start to drift deeper into sleep, let your mind loop back through that cycle one more time.
Suck, squeeze, freeze.
The rhythm is in your body now. That suck, squeeze, bang, blow cadence feels almost like a lullaby. Repetitive, mechanical, weirdly soothing. But there's a new sound entering your dreamscape now. It's deeper, angrier, heavier. You look over, and there it is. A Lamborghini Aventador. Tez. Midnight black, all muscle and menace, idling like it's waiting to pounce. The V12 under its glass engine cover isn't just running, it's vibrating the ground beneath your feet. You're not even touching the throttle, and yet your ribcage is buzzing. What you're hearing isn't just a powerful engine, it's a lot of cylinders, and they're not here to be subtle. Tonight you're going to understand why Lamborghini and other performance-obsessed automakers fall head over heels for engines with way more cylinders than they strictly need. Let's start with something basic. A cylinder is just a single combustion chamber. One piston, one spark plug, one chamber for that fire and pressure party we've been talking about. So why not keep it simple? Why not build a massive single-cylinder engine that gets the job done? Because that would be a mess. One cylinder gives you one power stroke every 2 revolutions, which means your engine is spending a lot of time not producing power. It's like a boxer who throws one punch and then just stands there for 4 seconds before swinging again. You want more punches, faster punches, constant pressure. So you add cylinders. A 2-cylinder engine is better. 4 is better still. Now we're getting more consistent power output and smoother operation. Each cylinder fires at a different time, so the engine stays balanced and doesn't shake itself to death. Now let's crank it to absurdity. Enter the V10 and V12. The engine configurations Lamborghini and Ferrari are known for. The V10 gives you 10 opportunities to create explosions. The V12 gives you 12, with that many cylinders firing in quick, overlapping succession. The engine's power delivery becomes silky, instant, relentless. No waiting, no lag, just continuous violence turned into speed. The Lamborghini Huracan uses a 5.2-liter naturally aspirated V10 that revs to 8,500 revolutions per minute. That means each piston is completing 142 revolutions per second. Multiply that by 10, and you have a combustion orchestra running at nearly 1,500 bangs per second. That's not just power. That's texture. That's emotion. You feel it in your chest. It tingles in your fingertips when you grip the wheel. It makes the hairs on your arms stand up when you rev it near a canyon wall, and the echo comes back like a war cry. Here's the nerdy science fact. More cylinders means shorter, lighter pistons, which can rev higher. And because the power strokes overlap more, the engine's torque curve is smoother. No surges, no gaps, just linear, predictable violence. But it's not all magic. More cylinders mean more weight, more friction, more complexity, more cost. Think about it. Each cylinder needs valves, spark plugs, injectors, and a chunk of crankshaft. A V12 engine might have 48 valves. That's a valve train more complicated than your entire high school schedule. Every extra moving part is another thing that can break. And yet, Lamborghini does it anyway. Ferrari too. Why? Because, feel Trump's math. A V10 or V12 doesn't just give you power, it gives you sound. A kind of mechanical singing that no inline 4 or V6 can replicate. That wailing high-pitched scream of a Ferrari 812 superfast at 9,000 revolutions per minute. Oh, that's not just volume, that's harmonic structure. Each cylinder acts like an instrument. The exhaust pulses combine, resonate, and create that specific sound signature. Engineers spend years tuning the headers and exhaust lengths to make that note perfect. It's why Ferraris don't just go fast. They howl. And here's a quirky tidbit. Lamborghini has never made a turbocharged V12. Why? Because turbos muffle sound. They dilute the rawness. Instead, Lamborghini sticks with natural aspiration, accepting lower efficiency in exchange for an engine note that's closer to an operatic scream than a mechanical hum. That's also why the Aventador's successor, the Revuelto, still uses a V12, even as the rest of the industry downsizes. Lambo digs in its heels. They know what their drivers want: visceral, loud, unapologetic. Scientists still argue whether these high cylinder count engines are necessary anymore. With advances in turbocharging, electric assistance, and hybrid drivetrains, it's possible to get insane power from a tiny fuel-sipping motor. Look at the AMG 1 or the McLaren Artura. Smaller engines, monstrous results, but still, none of them feel like a naturally aspirated V12. Here's a little-known side note. The firing order. The sequence in which the cylinders fire matters. It shapes the engine's sound, its vibration characteristics, even how the exhaust note builds over time. Ferrari uses unique firing orders in their V8 and V12s to craft that specific song, not just noise, music. There's also a touch of legacy in this obsession. Back in the 1960s and 70s, a V12 was the gold standard for elite performance. It was exotic, complex, rare. Enzo Ferrari himself once said that a V12 was the only proper engine for a grand touring car. Anything less was for amateurs. Lamborghini, they went even further. The original Miura had a transversely mounted V12, a weird choice, and a packaging nightmare. But it made the car lighter and more agile, bold, rebellious, so very Lamborghini. You lie there now, wrapped in your blanket, the hum of the fan slipping into the rumble of memory. You can almost hear the idle of a V12, uneven, choppy, like the engine's grumbling about being awake. Then you picture the tach needle rising, 4,000 revolutions per minute, 6,000, 8,000. And suddenly, the grumble becomes a scream. Here's something to remember when you're awake tomorrow. Most 5012s today aren't built for speed. They're built for emotion. The actual horsepower could be replicated with a turbo V8, but the experience, never. You can feel the difference when you lift off the throttle. The engine doesn't just stop, it lingers, echoes, moans, like it wants more, like it's begging you not to leave it alone. And you don't want to, because even though a V12 is inefficient, heavy, expensive, and obsolete by future standards, it's alive, or it feels like it. You reach for the next gear. In your mind, the paddle clicks, the revs drop, the scream returns, and you drift back into the road inside your dream. The fan in your room now purrs like a distant engine on cooldown, and your dream has morphed into something sharper, edgier. The road is gone. You're sitting in a gas station at midnight, somewhere on the Italian coast. Moonlight glints off the hood of a Ferrari 58 Tribio. You pop the fuel cap open, and there's a question in the air. What are you feeding this beast? Because tonight we're diving into something deceptively simple. Specifically, octane, detonation, and the terrifying, beautiful physics behind that trademark Ferrari growl. Let's start with a hard truth. Gasoline is unstable. That's kind of the point. You don't want calm, passive chemicals inside your combustion chamber. You want something flammable, reactive, and explosive, but not too explosive. See, when you compress fuel and air inside a cylinder, you're setting up a tiny powder keg. The spark plug is supposed to light it precisely at the moment of maximum compression. If everything goes right, the explosion expands smoothly, pushes the piston down, and the engine sings. But if something goes wrong, you get detonation. Detonation, or knocking, is when the fuel-air mixture ignites prematurely, or unevenly, or both. Instead of one clean flame front, you get multiple pressure waves colliding like a mosh pit in a coffee mug. The result is a sharp metallic ping, and if it's bad enough, catastrophic damage. Your piston might survive thousands of explosions per minute, but one bad knock that can crack it in half, warp your cylinder head, ruin your valves, end your weekend drive with a very expensive Uber ride. Well, now, here's where octane comes in. Octane rating isn't about how much energy is in the fuel. It's about resistance to premature ignition. The higher the octane, the more you can compress the fuel before it spontaneously combusts. This means high-performance engines with high compression ratios, like the 9.61 in a Ferrari 488 Pista, need high-octane fuel to survive. Using 87 octane in a Ferrari is like feeding chili to a baby. You might get away with it once, but don't be surprised if everything explodes. Here's the mainstream fact of the night. Most American premium gas is 91 octane. European supercars often ask for 95 or even 98, one roughly equivalent to US 93, 94. You can't boost lower octane fuel with hope and positive vibes. If the octane's too low, the engine will pull timing. Lower boost pressure, if turbocharged, and neuter itself to avoid detonation. It'll run. But it won't feel right, and speaking of feel, let's talk about that Ferrari growl. You hear it when the engine starts. A deep burble that quickly morphs into a snarling crescendo as the RPMs climb. That sound isn't an accident. It's a blend of mechanical tuning, exhaust harmonics, and a bit of acoustic witchcraft. Ferrari engineers obsess over this. The length of the intake runners, the diameter of the exhaust pipes, the placement of mufflers. All of it is designed not just to minimize back pressure, but to shape sound. The engine note isn't just a byproduct, it's a signature. And guess what plays a role in that tone? Combustion speed. A faster, hotter combustion changes the pressure wave profile that exits the exhaust valves, which in turn affects the resonance of the entire exhaust system. That aggressive staccato bark at 5,000 revolutions per minute, that's pressure and temperature translating into music. There's a fringe tidbit for you. Some Ferrari and Lamborghini models actually fake parts of their exhaust note, especially at lower speeds, by using the car's speakers to enhance certain frequencies inside the cabin. It's not just for volume, it's to make you feel something even at 40 kilometers per h. Engineers still argue whether this is cheating. Purists hate it. But in an era of tighter emissions and sound regulations, some see it as the only way to preserve the emotional core of the combustion experience. Now, let's look deeper into the dark side of combustion. In an ideal world, every droplet of fuel would burn completely, turning into CO5 and water vapor. But reality is messy. Incomplete combustion creates unburned hydrocarbons, soot, and carbon monoxide. Heat and pressure variations lead to nitrogen oxides NOx, which are not friendly. That's why modern engines are packed with catalytic converters, oxygen sensors, and fuel trim software, constantly adjusting the air-fuel mixture to stay as close to the ideal stoichiometric ratio, 14.7, 1 for gasoline as possible. Still, even the best-tuned Ferrari is dirty compared to your neighbor's Prius. But you didn't buy a Ferrari to save the planet. You bought it for the feel, the fire, the way it sings. Let's get poetic for a second. Combustion isn't just about power. It's a ritual. Every time you press the pedal, you're asking the car to sacrifice a little fuel on the altar of speed. The fire burns. The piston drops. You move forward. You hear it. You feel it. And if the octane's right, the timing's perfect, and the air's cool and dense, you get that one perfect moment where everything sinks. The power hits like a hammer wrapped in silk. The sound echoes off your bones. The car disappears beneath you. It's just motion, just combustion, just you and physics, dancing. One more side note. Before you drift off in the 80s and 90s, Japanese tuner cars ran water injection systems to cool the combustion chamber and suppress detonation. They literally sprayed water mist into the intake to drop temperatures and allow more aggressive tuning. Today, some high-end cars are bringing that back because modern turbo engines run so hot and under so much pressure. They're begging for detonation. Water keeps them calm. It's like giving your engine a chilled towel during a workout, and tomorrow it might be even more complex. Synthetic fuels, direct injection, variable compression ratios. Engineers are working on ways to keep combustion alive, even in a world sprinting toward electric silence. Whether they'll succeed is unclear, but as of tonight, the fire still burns. So next time you hear that Ferrari growl echo down a tunnel, remember what's really happening. Chemistry, pressure, flame, a carefully timed explosion, fueled by octane molecules trembling under compression, ignited in a flash and exhaled in a scream. The fan sounds distant now, less like an engine, more like wind in a tunnel. Your foot twitches, you're still pressing that throttle. The tunnel of your dream is tighter now. The road is straight, the walls echoing every sound back to you like a mirrored scream. You hear the engine again, but this time, it's different. It's sharper. There's a high-pitched whistle riding above the roar. You're about to meet turbochargers, little metallic tornadoes that take what your engine throws away and turn it into more violence. Let's start with the big idea. Your engine needs air to burn fuel. The more air it gets, the more fuel it can burn, and the more power it can make. But naturally aspirated engines, like the V10 in a Lamborghini Huracan, can only suck in so much air. They rely on atmospheric pressure and the downward stroke of the piston. But what if we force more air in? That's where turbochargers come in. They take hot, high-pressure exhaust gases, the literal waste from combustion, and spin a turbine with them. That turbine is connected via a shaft to a compressor on the intake side. As exhaust spins the turbine, the compressor sucks in air, compresses it, and rams it into the engine. It's recycling, but for horsepower. A well-tuned turbo system can boost air pressure from atmospheric approximately 14.7 psi to 20-30, even 40 psi or more. That's 2 or 3 times the air, which means 2 or 3 times the potential power, all without changing the size of the engine. It's like feeding a lion double portions and expecting it to behave. You're cramming more into the same space, and you're asking for more output in return. Now here's your mainstream fact. Nearly every modern Ferrari uses turbochargers now. The 488 GTB, twin-turbo V8, the F8 Tributo, also twin-turbo. Even the SF90's V8 is turbocharged. Why? Because emissions regulations and fuel economy standards have made naturally aspirated engines an endangered species. Turbos offer a way out, more power, better efficiency, fewer emissions. But there's a trade-off. Turbo lag. You press the pedal and the engine hesitates. Just a beat, because the turbo relies on exhaust pressure. And when you're at low RPM, there isn't enough pressure to spin that turbine fast enough. So you wait, then it hits. A sudden surge of boost. A tidal wave of torque. It can feel like being sucker punched in the spine with a smile. And here's where things get wild. That delay, the turbo lag, isn't just a flaw. It's become a feature. Drivers crave it. The buildup, the tension, that half second of will it happen, followed by a kick so brutal it snaps your neck and erases your doubts. Some manufacturers, especially Porsche, spend millions trying to eliminate turbo lag. Others, they lean into it. The Ferrari F40, a legend of the 1980s, had turbo lag so violent it practically punished you for shifting wrong. Below 4,000 revolutions per minute, it was tame. At 5,000, it tried to kill you, and drivers loved it. Here's a fringe tidbit. Some performance cars use anti-lag systems, especially in racing. These systems keep the turbo spinning even when you're off throttle. They do it by injecting air or fuel into the exhaust manifold, which creates controlled explosions that keep the turbine hot and spinning. Yes, they literally make tiny post-combustion fireworks just to reduce delay. Sounds insane. It is, but it works. Of course, the moment you start forcing more air in, everything else needs to adjust. You need stronger pistons, reinforced head gaskets, bigger intercoolers to cool the compressed air. Because when you compress air it gets hot, and hot air is bad for combustion. So now you've added 50 more things just to make your engine breathe harder. Turbos are drama queens, high-strung, heat-sensitive, complex. But when they sing, and that whistle you sometimes hear when a car blows past you on the freeway. That's the turbo spooling up, a sound that says, I'm about to be very, very irresponsible. Then there's the blow-off valve, that delicious PS you hear when a turbocharged car lifts off the throttle. When the throttle plate suddenly closes, all that compressed air has nowhere to go. So it's vented, sometimes into the intake system, sometimes into the atmosphere. It sounds ridiculous. It is ridiculous, but it's also addictive. It's the mechanical equivalent of a sigh of relief after holding your breath during a high-speed run. Engineers still argue whether electric turbos, powered by tiny electric motors instead of exhaust gas, are the future. They eliminate lag, spin instantly, offer precise control. Mercedes-AMG has already started playing with this tech in F1 and street cars. But it adds complexity, cost, and software dependency. And let's be honest, electric turbos don't sound as good. One of the joys of a turbocharged Ferrari isn't just the power, it's the character. The way the engine changes tone as the boost builds, the hiss of the wastegate, the delayed violence that hits like a slap from a machine that wanted you to wait. Turbocharged engines are often misunderstood. People think they're just cheating. Add a turbo, make more power, easy. But tuning a turbo engine is like keeping a volcano sedated. Too little boost, boring. Too much, boom, and not the fun kind. The fuel-air ratio has to be perfect. The timing, impeccable. NOx sensors, wideband oxygen sensors, boost controllers, all working together to make sure you don't send a piston through your hood. And the heat, oh the heat. Turbochargers live in the worst part of the car, the exhaust side. Temperatures can exceed 1,000 degrees Celsius. That's glowing red metal, cooking everything nearby. That's why turbochargers often get heat shields, ceramic coatings, even dedicated oil and water cooling loops. Oh! You drift deeper now, your breath sinking with the distant pulse of a turbine spooling up. You feel the boost building, not in your ears, but in your ribs. You imagine that moment at 3,500 revolutions per minute, when the pressure finally crests and everything changes. Also, that moment when a car goes from car to event. You're not just accelerating, you're igniting excess. Turbochargers take what your engine throws away, hot air, and turns it into forward motion. It's efficiency, violence, magic. You don't even hear your fan anymore. You hear the hiss, the whir, the scream, and it means something's about to happen. You're deeper into the dream now. The road is gone, the tunnel has faded, and you're somewhere between motion and memory. But there's a new feeling creeping in. Heat, not fire, not combustion, not the satisfying bang of a power stroke. This is quieter, lingering, heavy. Your car isn't moving anymore, but it's still hot. Because here's the part no one brags about at car meets or track days. Cooling systems are the real MVPs of performance engines. They don't make noise. They don't get flashy Instagram reels. But without them, that $400,000 V12 sculpture in the back of your Lamborghini would melt into an aluminum puddle before you even hit second gear. Tonight we open the hood on the quietest war your car ever fights. The war against heat. Remember back in section 3, we talked about waste heat, how combustion is inherently inefficient. Well, now we're zeroing in on the gear that keeps your engine from self-destructing every time you push it. Let's walk through what happens the second you start your engine. The fuel combusts, generating explosive pressure and a ton of heat. Some of it useful to push the piston, but most of it trying to escape. That heat has to go somewhere, fast, and that's where your cooling system comes in. First, there's the coolant itself, a mix of water and antifreeze, typically ethylene glycol. It circulates through the engine block and cylinder head, absorbing the heat from the metal like a liquid heat sponge. This now hot coolant flows to the radiator, a dense network of aluminum tubes and cooling fins sitting at the front of the car. As air rushes past, either from the car moving or fans blowing, it pulls heat off the coolant and sends it into the atmosphere. That's it. That's the system. Except it's not really that simple, because everything has to be timed perfectly. The thermostat regulates flow. If the engine's still cold, it holds the coolant back, helping the engine warm up faster. If it's hot, it opens wide, letting the coolant flood through. Your radiator fans kick in at specific temps, sometimes staged at multiple speeds. Some Ferraris even run electric water pumps that continue circulating coolant after the engine shuts off, just to keep the system from boiling over while the car sleeps. And here's your mainstream fact for the night. Engines are designed to operate at specific temperatures, usually around 90 to 105 degrees Celsius, 194, 221 degrees Fahrenheit. Too cold and fuel doesn't atomize properly. Too hot and oil breaks down, metal expands, and things warp. So your cooling system isn't just keeping it from overheating, it's keeping it ideal. Like a spa, but with more screaming and explosions. Let's take it further. Performance engines, like those in Ferraris and Lamborghinis, generate way more heat than your average family sedan, so their cooling systems have to be smarter. Multiple radiators, oil coolers, transmission coolers, intercoolers for the turbos, even brake cooling ducts. The Ferrari SF90 has 7 separate cooling circuits. 7. That's a symphony of pumps, fans, hoses, and fluid types, all working in sync, like a mechanical circulatory system. Here's a fringe detail you'll love. The Lamborghini Aventador has cooling fans that are directional. That means they change direction based on speed and load to either pull or push air in the most efficient way possible. It's like the car is breathing, exhaling heat, inhaling fresh air. It's not just the engine that needs cooling. Your engine oil doubles as a cooling agent. That's why supercars often use oil coolers, sometimes mounted in the side pods or rear fenders. The hotter the oil gets, the thinner it becomes. Thin oil can't cushion the metal parts, so cooling the oil is mission critical. And don't get me started on brake cooling. When you slow down from 200 kilometers per h to 50 in 2 seconds, your brake rotors hit 700 degrees Celsius. That's pizza oven hot, so your car channels air directly over them, sometimes even using active aero to open and close vents as needed. Here's something engineers are still fighting over: liquid versus air cooling. Some say air-cooled engines, like the old Porsche 911S, are simpler and more reliable. Others argue liquid cooling is far more precise, especially in high-output engines. The debate continues, but for now, liquid wins. You can't keep a modern V8 cool with just airflow. There's too much going on, too fast. Now let's talk about thermal soak, the heat that stays trapped in the engine after you shut it off. It's why your hood stays hot for hours. Why sometimes after a track day your coolant actually boils after the engine has stopped spinning. That's where cool-down laps come in. Racers don't just shut the car off, they coast. Let air and coolant keep flowing. Let the brakes breathe. Let the engine exhale. You should too. If you hammer your Ferrari down a mountain road and then park it immediately in a garage with no airflow, that's a thermal time bomb. Hoses crack, fluids cook, electronics get roasted. It's not sexy, but managing heat is the difference between a Ferrari that runs like an orchestra and one that sounds like a blender full of bolts. You lie there now, blanket tangled around you like radiator hoses. Your fan still spinning, slowly, quietly. You can almost feel the residual heat of that imaginary engine pulsing through the sheets. Not burning, just lingering. Cooling isn't about making the heat disappear. It's about moving it somewhere else, out the vents, into the air, away from the metal that matters. Because the engine is always ready to destroy itself. Combustion is inherently unstable. Pressure is always threatening to crack a gasket. Friction wants to turn pistons into slag. And the only thing standing between that chaos and your peaceful Sunday drive, a little green liquid, a fan, some aluminum tubes, maybe a vent or two. That's it. It's easy to overlook. Cooling is quiet, invisible, not nearly as sexy as turbos or titanium exhausts. But when it fails, you'll notice, because when cooling fails, the engine doesn't die slowly. It dies in a spectacle. And so tonight, give a little thanks to the part of your car that doesn't shout, the silent protector. The radiator hum you barely hear until it's gone. You're somewhere between sleep and speed. Now, the road has returned in your dream, but it's different. Wide, straight, endless. The engine's not roaring, it's humming, purring, breathing. The car is at full throttle, but it feels strangely calm. That calm, it's coming from the exhaust system. Tonight, we're finally looking at the part of your car that nobody really talks about, unless it's shooting flames or waking up the neighborhood, the exhaust. But trust me, it's doing way more than just making noise. Let's start with the obvious. After combustion happens, after the bang in the suck squeeze bang blow cycle, you're left with exhaust gases, mostly nitrogen, carbon dioxide, water vapor, and small amounts of carbon monoxide, unburned hydrocarbons, and other leftovers, all of it hot. This stuff has to get out. Fast. That's where your exhaust manifold comes in. It's bolted directly to the cylinder head and acts like a funnel, collecting the spent gases from each cylinder and sending them down a single or dual path toward the rear of the car. But here's where it gets interesting. The speed, length, and shape of that exhaust path matters a lot, because when exhaust leaves the cylinder, it creates a pressure wave. If timed just right, that wave can actually help pull more exhaust out of the cylinder, or even draw in fresh air-fuel mixture for the next cycle. This effect is called scavenging, and it's one of the hidden arts of engine tuning. It's not about getting rid of gases. It's about using them. Now let's get into something a bit more tangible. Back pressure. Back pressure is resistance in the exhaust system. Any turbulence or narrowing that slows down the flow of gases. A little bit of it is necessary to keep the engine smooth. Too much, and you choke it. You lose power. The engine sounds weird. It breathes like someone with a clogged nose. High-performance cars like Ferraris and Lamborghinis use carefully tuned exhaust systems to minimize back pressure while maximizing scavenging. The pipes are often equal length, meaning the gases from each cylinder arrive at the merge point evenly, reducing turbulence and improving flow. And the material, usually stainless steel or Inconel, a nickel-chromium alloy that resists high temps and corrosion. Some ultra-exotic builds even use titanium, which is incredibly light, strong, and absurdly expensive. Here's your mainstream fact. At wide open throttle, The temperature of the exhaust gas in a turbocharged engine can exceed 1000 degrees Celsius, 1832 degrees Fahrenheit. That's hotter than lava. Your tailpipes are basically volcanic vents. And now for the real reason most people care about exhausts. Sound. The sound of a car isn't created by the engine alone. It's the exhaust that shapes it. The length of the pipes, the diameter, the number of bends, the mufflers, the resonators, it's all a tuned musical instrument. Ferrari's exhaust note is iconic. It's not just loud, it changes. As RPM rises, the harmonics shift. There's a low-end burble at idle, a sharper bite in the mid-range, and a high-pitched scream above 7,000 revolutions per minute that sounds less like a machine and more like an animal or an aria. Here's a fringe tidbit. Some modern Ferraris use bypass valves in the exhaust. At low RPM, the valve is closed, routing the exhaust through a longer, quieter path. But at higher RPM, or under heavy throttle, the valve opens, sending exhaust straight through a shorter, louder pipe. You're literally changing instruments mid-song. Lamborghinis go even further. The Huracan STO uses a titanium exhaust developed with a Kropovich, tuned not just for flow, but for volume. It's designed to sound like a track car with no filters. And yes, it shoots flames on deceleration. You're not just driving a car.
Balls.
You're conducting a concert of controlled explosions and stainless steel resonance. But let's rewind a bit. Before the exhaust ever reaches your ears, or flames shoot from the tips, it passes through a catalytic converter.
Balls.
This device takes those nasty leftovers from combustion, carbon monoxide, nitrogen oxides, unburned hydrocarbons, and chemically converts them into less harmful gases using platinum, palladium, and rhodium. It gets hot, like melt your hand off hot, and in some supercars, the catalytic converter reaches operating temperature within 30 seconds of engine start. Because emissions regulations demand it. You may not love what it does to sound, but without it, your car would be toxic enough to fail inspection in a heartbeat. Engineers still argue about the balance between performance and emissions. Some purists strip out the catalytic converter altogether for track use, but for road cars, it's the price you pay to keep the fire legal. Let's not forget the muffler either.
Balls.
It's not just a silencer. It's an acoustic maze. Inside are chambers, perforated tubes, and baffles that cancel out specific frequencies, like a noise-canceling headphone for your tailpipe. Some mufflers are tuned to resonate at just the right RPM, to enhance growl without causing drone. And now, the visual effect. When a supercar shoots flames, it's not just for show. It happens when unburned fuel enters the exhaust and ignites on contact with the hot air. It's a mix of aggressive fuel mapping, late ignition timing, and high exhaust temps. Sometimes it's intentional, sometimes it's a byproduct, but always, it's awesome. You're lying in bed now, fan humming like a twin-tip exhaust, and you think about that moment when you lift off the throttle and the car gives you a pop crackle. That's fuel still burning mid-flight. It's raw, unfiltered, chaotic. It's the engine's afterthought turned into art. And here's something to keep in your mind as you drift. When you hear a Ferrari scream past on the freeway, you're not just hearing power. You're hearing air being sucked, fuel being ignited, pistons pounding, gases racing out the back, and a symphony of pressure waves dancing through pipes hand-shaped in Italy. You're hearing the exit wound of speed. The engine pulls, the exhaust pushes. Together, they make magic. And the next time you hear that scream echo through a tunnel, you'll know. You're not just hearing an engine, you're hearing the tail end of a flame. Now the road in your dream stretches flat and endless, and your imaginary foot is planted firmly on the throttle. The sound is peaking, the exhaust is screaming, and you're flying. Not just driving, flying. The car isn't resisting the wind anymore. It's cutting through it like it owns it. But even now, you're leaving something behind. Not just exhaust, not just rubber, but energy. Because tonight's story is about limits, about ceilings, about how thermodynamics defines the very edge of speed. This isn't just a story about motion. It's about the cost of motion and the invisible forces trying to slow you down. Let's start with this. Your car burns fuel to create heat, and heat becomes motion. We've covered that, but not all of that motion is used efficiently. Some of it is dragged away by the air, some lost to friction, and some, quite a bit, actually simply turns back into heat as soon as you touch the brakes. This is the heat budget of speed. The faster you go, the more resistance you face. Not just mechanical resistance, but aerodynamic drag, which increases with the square of your speed. Double your speed, and the drag quadruples. That means if you want to go just a little faster, you need a lot more power. It's exponential. It's brutal. It's why hitting 200 kilometers per h feels quick, but pushing from 300 to 320 feels like shoving a wall. Here's your mainstream fact. A modern supercar like the Ferrari 812 Superfast produces over 700 horsepower, and yet it still takes several full seconds to go from 320 to 340 kilometers per h. Why? Because the energy required to overcome air resistance at that speed is enormous. It's not just the car fighting the air, it's fighting physics. This is where aerodynamics enters the picture. Ferrari, Lamborghini, McLaren, they all spend thousands of hours in wind tunnels fine-tuning the shape of their cars. Every crease, every vent, every panel has a purpose. It's all about minimizing drag and maximizing downforce, the force that pushes the car down onto the road, giving it grip at high speed. But here's the catch. Downforce creates drag. The more you plant the car to the ground, the more air you push against. It's a balancing act. More grip means slower top speed. Less grip means faster speed. But you might take flight if you hit a bump. You remember that famous story about the Mercedes CLR at Le Mans? Back in 1999. It literally took off because of an aerodynamic miscalculation. At high speed, the air pressure under the car lifted the front end, and it flipped like a toy. So yeah, top speed isn't just about power. It's about design, balance, stability. Now let's talk about rolling resistance. The friction between your tires and the road. Performance tires have more grip, which means more resistance. They're sticky, wide, and soft. Great for cornering, not so great for coasting. And they generate heat. Lots of it. At 300 plus km/h, your tires are cooking. Literally. That's why top speed runs are done carefully, with tire temperatures monitored like a surgeon watches a patient's pulse. Then there's gear ratios. Your car's transmission determines how fast the engine spins relative to your wheels. Shorter gears give you quick acceleration. Longer gears give you higher top speed. But there's a trade-off: too tall a gear, and the engine can't stay in its power band. Too short, and you redline before hitting peak velocity. And this is where thermodynamics smirks again. Because even if you could make a car with infinite power and zero drag and perfect tires, you'd still hit a wall. The engine itself becomes the limit. It overheats. The oil thins. The coolant can't keep up. The air entering the intake gets hot. The combustion efficiency drops. You start making less power the faster you go. That's not just design failure. That's entropy. And here's a fringe fact. Some cars, like the Bugatti Chiron, have speed limiters not for safety, but because the tires can't handle more than 420 kilometers per h for extended periods. There's simply no tire on Earth that can survive that kind of sustained heat, yet. So we cheat. We use hybrids. We add electric motors to assist at lower speeds, reducing the load on the combustion engine. We optimize the aerodynamics with active flaps that adjust in real time. We tweak fuel maps to deliver precise bursts of energy. We cool everything better. We shape everything smarter. But we're still just rearranging losses. Even Formula One, pinnacle of automotive tech, burns fuel and loses more than half of its energy as heat. All that speed, all that tech, still kneecapped by thermodynamics. Scientists still argue whether we'll ever break free of these limits. Solid-state batteries, hydrogen combustion, regenerative braking that actually captures more than a sliver of what you lose. But for now, speed costs heat, and the faster you go, the more you owe. You're in bed now, flat on your back, like a wind tunnel model. And you feel the pressure of air rushing around you, not real air, but imagined force. The sound of an engine pulling against wind, the way your neck strains against the seatbelt when you floor it on an empty highway. You think about the power-to-weight ratio, the drag coefficient, the gear ratios, the thermal thresholds. You don't need to know the numbers. You feel them. You are them. Because when you press the throttle in a Ferrari, you're not just accelerating. You're throwing yourself into a battle with nature. A battle you'll never win, but one you'll never stop chasing. Your dream is shifting gears now. Literally, the high-speed straights are gone, replaced by a winding mountain road under moonlight. The car isn't roaring anymore. It's whispering, smooth, quiet, controlled. You glance down at the dash. There's a soft blue glow. The tach needle is low. The engine isn't even running. You're still moving. Tonight you're in a hybrid. Not the kind that makes you feel morally superior at the grocery store. No, you're in something like the Ferrari SF90 Surreal, a 986 horsepower symphony of combustion and electricity. Because this section, it's all about hybrids, and how thermodynamics gets weird when there's more than one power source involved. You already know the basics of internal combustion: fuel, fire, motion, heat. But a hybrid throws another player into the pit: the electric motor. These motors don't combust. They don't scream. They don't even breathe. They just spin, instantly, quietly, efficiently. And that efficiency, it's intoxicating. An electric motor converts over 90% of the energy it receives into motion. Compare that to the 25–30% of a typical gasoline engine. Suddenly your V8 starts looking like a bit of a slob. So what do? You combine them. In a performance hybrid like the SF90, you have a twin-turbo V8 and 3 electric motors, one on each front wheel and one between the engine and transmission. They work together like a tactical team. The electric motors handle low-speed torque. The combustion engine takes over at high speed, and sometimes they both work together to launch you into another dimension. That seamlessness, that's software. The car's brain decides which power source to use, when, and how much. It blends torque curves. It coordinates battery discharge. It regulates cooling loops and drive modes. All in the background, while you pretend you're the one in control. It's not just thermodynamics anymore. It's thermodynamics in a threesome: heat, electricity, and code. Here's your mainstream fact. The Ferrari SF90 can drive up to 25 kilometers on electric power alone. No sound, no emissions, just eerie silence and instant torque. Around town it's docile, gentle. Your neighbors don't even know what's hiding under the hood. But touch the throttle hard enough, and the V8 wakes up like a dragon that's had enough of your nonsense. The transition isn't a switch, it's a symphony cue. The electric motors fade. The engine surges, and now you've got nearly 1,000 horsepower being delivered by two completely different species of propulsion. working together like they've always been one thing. Let's get a bit more technical. When you press the accelerator, the electric motors provide instant torque. No lag, no spool up. They're especially good at low speeds. When turbos are lazy and combustion isn't efficient, the V8 takes over in the mid and high range, where its thermodynamic muscle shines. This means you get the best of both worlds: lightning fast launches, endless mid-range power, a high RPM scream when you want it, and the engine, it's running less often, under less stress, and more efficiently when it does. That's hybrid synergy. But there's more. When you brake, the electric motors become generators, capturing kinetic energy and turning it into electrical energy to recharge the battery. This is regenerative braking. It's not perfect. Only a fraction of the energy is recovered. But it's better than dumping it all as heat into your rotors. It's a small rebellion against entropy, a brief moment where you get something back. And here's the kicker. This hybrid setup makes the car faster. The SF90 isn't a compromise. It's Ferrari's quickest production car ever. 0 to 100 kilometers per h in 2.5 seconds. Top speed, 340 kilometers per h. Lap times that beat everything before it. And it does it with fewer emissions than most of its older siblings. It's not just evolution. It's a paradigm shift. Of course, there's a fringe tidbit. Early hybrids in motorsports were hated. In Formula One, when the hybrid era began in 2014, fans complained the cars sounded like vacuum cleaners. Teams struggled with the complexity. Drivers had to manage energy harvesting, deployment modes, brake balance, while racing at 300 kilometers per h. It was messy, awkward, almost clinical, but now, it's art. Modern hybrids like the SF90 don't just add electric power, they integrate it, viscerally. You don't feel like you're driving two cars fused together. You feel like you're in something smarter than you, like the machine is orchestrating speed, not just providing it. Engineers still argue whether hybrid supercars are just a stepping stone to full electrification, or a permanent new species. Some say we'll all be in EVs within a decade. Others believe hybrids are the perfect balance: range, sound, drama, and performance, with none of the guilt. But, in a Ferrari, guilt was never part of the deal. And here's something to chew on. Because electric motors can be placed independently, you can do crazy things with torque vectoring. The SF90 can send more power to the outside wheel in a corner, helping you rotate the car when it feels like cheating, like physics is working for you, not against you. All thanks to electricity. You're in bed now, still, but your mind is slicing through mountain switchbacks under electric power, silent, poised, precise. Then the V8 lights up and throws you out of the turn, like you've been launched from a slingshot. This isn't Frankenstein, it's harmony. Hybrid power isn't just efficient, it's strategic. It's the car playing chess while you pretend you're playing checkers. And tomorrow, when you wake up and see an SF90 roll past you in traffic, you won't just hear the soft whir of the motors, or the occasional purr of the engine. You'll hear a conversation between two worlds, old and new, combustion and current, fire and silence. And for a brief moment, you'll understand what happens when thermodynamics grows up and gets electric. Your dream has shifted again. The speed is still there, but it's quieter now, smarter, cleaner. The engine doesn't sound like it's fighting anymore. It sounds confident. You're no longer wrangling a beast. You're conducting a symphony. This is the part of the ride where machines think. Because tonight you're peeking into the brains behind the fire, the engine map, the digital soul of modern combustion, and how tuning has become the dark art of making thermodynamics dance. Let's start with what an engine map actually is. It's not a piece of paper. It's not even a physical component. It's software, code, a set of algorithms that tells your engine exactly how to behave under every possible condition. Like a conductor holding a baton, it cues every note, how much fuel to inject, when to spark, how much air to mix in, what to do when you lift off the throttle, how to handle a cold start, how to react to altitude changes, how to limit torque in the rain. This is the ECU, Engine Control Unit, and inside it lives an orchestra of maps. Not one map, dozens, hundreds, fuel maps, ignition maps, boost maps, knock correction tables, throttle response curves, each tuned, calibrated, and stacked like layers of strategy. In a Ferrari or Lamborghini, these maps aren't generic, they're sculpted, years of testing, engineers poring over data logs from test mules that lap Fiorano 1,000 times, until every shift, every burble, every vibration is precisely what it should be. It's not about power, it's about feel. Here's your mainstream fact. Modern ECUs adjust engine behavior hundreds of times per second. That's faster than your neurons fire, faster than you can react. The car is thinking constantly about how to make you feel like a god. But where it gets fun is in tuning. Tuning is when someone, maybe a factory engineer, maybe a mad genius in a basement, opens the map and starts tweaking it. Want more power? You can do that. Want a sharper throttle response? Easy. Want it to shoot flames when you downshift? Sure. Why not? Tuning is the black magic of internal combustion. It's part math, part physics, part art. A good tuner knows how to extract horsepower without blowing up the engine. A great tuner makes it feel faster even when the dyno says otherwise. You're changing how the engine breathes, burns, and thinks. You're reprogramming the machine's personality. Want a fringe tidbit? Some supercars come with multiple maps you can switch between on the fly. That dial on your Ferrari steering wheel, the Menatino, isn't just a drive mode. It's a personality switch. Wet mode, conservative timing. Soft throttle, gentle shifts. Sport mode, sharper throttle. Higher rev limits, tighter shifts. Race mode, aggressive ignition, fast gear changes. More tail happiness. CT off. No traction control. The car trusts you. It probably shouldn't. In some Lamborghinis, there's even a Corsa mode, where the gearbox won't upshift automatically, even if you're bouncing off the rev limiter. Why? Because it assumes you're on a track, and it doesn't want to get in your way. The car isn't babying you anymore, it's obeying. Here's something darker. Tuning isn't always safe. Push too far. Lean out the fuel mixture. Over-advance the ignition. Demand more boost than the engine can handle. And boom, detonation. Melted pistons. Valve float. Carnage. There's a reason manufacturers leave headroom in the factory maps. They're not lazy. They're protecting the engine from you. But tuners don't care about your warranty. Tuners chase glory. Tuners want to make your Ferrari spit fire at red lights and hum like a fighter jet at 3,000 revolutions per minute. And sometimes they succeed. They adjust the air-fuel ratio to a razor's edge. They tweak ignition timing until the engine purrs with menace. They sharpen throttle maps so that one toe twitch in third gear sends the car sideways. The line between brilliance and destruction is paper thin. And if the tuner's really good, they don't just make it faster, they make it feel alive. Engineers still argue whether we're getting too far from the mechanical roots of driving, whether computers have taken over too much, whether a turbocharged, electronically tuned hybrid Ferrari still has a soul. But here's the counterpoint. Software doesn't kill the soul, it amplifies it. With tuning, you can make an engine lie. You can make a 2.9-liter V6 feel like a V8. You can make a turbo feel instant. You can trick the ear, sharpen the throttle, reshape the torque curve, so it feels like the car is reading your mind. It's not deception, it's seduction. Even rev matching That perfect throttle blip on a downshift is now done by the computer in many cars. You don't have to heel and toe anymore. The car does it for you, seamlessly, flawlessly, like a pianist who's memorized your hands. You don't just drive it, you collaborate with it. You lie there now, half asleep, and you feel it, that perfect downshift. The throttle blip, timed just right. The engine snarling as it settles into the next gear. You didn't do it, the car did, but it still feels like you. That's what the map does. It makes you better than you are. It makes the car feel smarter than it should. You're not driving a machine. You're driving a mood, one that shifts, one that learns, one that waits for your signal, and then tunes the fire to match your desire. You're in a garage now, still dreaming. But the hum of modern engines is gone, replaced by a different sound, not the angry growl of a V8, or the wail of a high-revving V12. No, this one is odd, hollow, unnatural, curious. That's the sound of a rotary engine, a wonkle. And tonight we're stepping off the predictable path and into the weird, wonderful world of the spinning triangle. You probably haven't driven a car with a rotary engine. Not many people have. All Mazda was the only one crazy enough to mass produce them for decades. But if you have heard one, maybe from an RX-7 or an RX-8, you know something's different. No pistons, no crankshaft, no conventional strokes. Instead of the suck, squeeze, bang, blow rhythm you've learned to love, the wonkle engine does something far stranger. It rotates, not up and down, not back and forth, but in a fluid, swirling, geometric dance. Let's start with the basics. The wonkle rotary engine uses a triangular rotor spinning inside an oval-like chamber. Each face of the triangle acts like a piston, creating combustion chambers as it rotates. It still follows the same four-stroke process, but does it in a completely different way. Imagine a Dorito doing ballet inside a peanut. Weird visual, sure, but accurate. The rotor spins around a central shaft, and as it does, each chamber goes through intake, compression, combustion, and exhaust. But here's the magic. While a piston engine fires once every 2 revolutions per cylinder, a wonkle engine has a power stroke every revolution per face. So for a 2-rotor engine, you get more frequent combustion in a much smaller, lighter package. The RX-7, for example, had a 1.3-liter rotary engine, but it made power like a 2.6-liter piston engine. Light, compact, rev-happy. It felt alive. Here's your mainstream fact. The wonkle engine has fewer moving parts than any piston engine. No valves, no camshafts, no connecting rods. It's simple in concept, and when it's working, it feels like magic. But there's a reason nobody uses them anymore. Several reasons, actually. Let's start with sealing. That spinning triangle, it has to maintain a tight seal against the chamber wall at 3 corners, called apex seals. These seals are the Achilles heel of the rotary engine. They wear out fast. They don't like heat. They don't like high RPM. And when they fail, you get compression loss, misfires, and eventually, a dead engine. Next up, fuel efficiency. Rotaries are thirsty, like really thirsty. They burn oil by design. Some is injected into the combustion chamber to lubricate the seals. Combine that with poor thermal efficiency and incomplete combustion, and you've got an engine that guzzles fuel and fails emissions tests even when it's idling politely. Then there's heat. Rotary engines run hot, really hot, and because they don't have distinct intake and exhaust strokes, those phases overlap more than in piston engines. You get weird thermal spikes and unpredictable combustion. This makes cooling a nightmare. All Mazda had to engineer special oil coolers, water jackets, and heat shielding just to keep the RX-7 from cooking itself on a warm day. Scientists still argue whether the rotary engine could be perfected with modern tech, better materials, direct injection, hybrid support, but so far, no one's figured out how to make it efficient and durable and clean. It's like trying to teach a dragon to breathe fire politely. But still, it feels different. People who've driven rotaries say the same thing. The throttle is razor sharp. The engine revs freely, eagerly, like it's not dragging any weight. There's no piston inertia, no valves slamming open and closed. Just a smooth, rising hum as the triangle spins faster and faster. You don't shift gears because you have to. You do it because the engine is begging you to. There's a fringe detail for your dreams. The Mazda 787B, the only rotary-powered car to ever win the 24 Hours of Le Mans, was banned from the race afterward, not because it broke the rules, but because it won, using a 4-rotor engine that screamed at 9,000 revolutions per minute and sounded like hell itself breaking loose. People still talk about it like it was alive, and here's the strange thing. Rotary engines are tiny. You could lift a Wonkel block with one hand, put 2 in your trunk, stack them in a suitcase. That compactness is what made them so appealing to tuners. You could drop one into a Miata and double the horsepower without adding weight, but with great weirdness comes great unreliability. Flooding, seal failure, hot starts that take forever, oil fouling, full emissions that make smog look like perfume. The rotary engine is a fragile genius, brilliant but unstable, a prodigy that never quite grew up. Mazda tried to keep it alive. The RX-8 was supposed to be the savior. But it suffered the same problems: poor fuel economy, tricky maintenance, and a reputation for quitting at the worst possible moment. Still, there's something haunting about it. You lie there now, half asleep, and you hear it, brap, 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 a strange stuttering pulse, like a heartbeat with rhythm but no melody. You imagine driving it. Featherlight throttle, instant response, and that surreal linear pull to redline. Not power, not violence, just spin, like a UFO pretending to be a car. And maybe that's why the Wonkel still matters. Not because it was better, but because it was different. In a world of standardized performance, predictable torque curves, and copy-paste V6s, the rotary engine felt like rebellion. It didn't care about being practical. It just wanted to be interesting. And that sometimes is enough. You're almost at the end now. The car has stopped. The fans are winding down. The garage is quiet. The engine clicks softly as it cools, metal contracting after a long, hot run. It feels like exhalation, like an old beast that gave you everything it had, and now rests. And here in the stillness is the final truth of all engines. Entropy always wins. You've spent this entire journey riding fire, feeding machines with fuel and air, forcing explosions into forward motion. You've felt the heat, heard the roar, marveled at the violence that somehow remains elegant. But tonight, as you settle into the last stretch of this dream, you need to understand that all of it, every supercar, every burnout, every perfect downshift, is built on borrowed time. Because thermodynamics doesn't care how fast you go. It only cares about what you lose along the way. Let's zoom out one last time. In any combustion engine, Ferrari, Lamborghini, Mazda, doesn't matter. The first law of thermodynamics says you can't create or destroy energy, just convert it. So you convert chemical energy, fuel, into thermal energy, heat, and then into mechanical energy, motion. But not all of it. You always lose some. In fact, you lose most of it. The second law is harsher. It says entropy, a measure of disorder, always increases. Every time you burn fuel, every time you move, you're creating waste. Heat that leaks into the air, friction that eats away at parts, randomness that spreads, precision dissolves, order decays. That's not an engineering flaw. That's the universe. Even the most efficient engine will wear down. Pistons will score. Bearings will grind. Oil will break down. Gaskets will leak. Heat will warp. Pressure will rise. And eventually, something will give. You'll replace parts, rebuild, retune, but it'll never be perfect again. That's the cost of combustion, even when the engine sounds healthy. Even when it's screaming at 8,000 revolutions per minute, pulling hard through the gears, entropy is still there. Nibbling at the edges, silently, patiently, that beautiful sound. It's a symphony of loss. And the faster you go, the hotter you burn. The more aggressively you drive, the faster you invite that entropy in. You're accelerating, not just through space, but through decay. It's beautiful. It's tragic. It's the reason a Ferrari feels like it's alive. Because anything that's alive dies. Here's your mainstream fact. Every high-performance engine has a rebuild schedule, not because it's weak, but because it's honest. Lamborghini's V12, Ferrari's twin-turbo V8 says, even Formula One power units. They're all designed to run at the edge, but only for so long. They expect to fall apart. Some hypercars come with documented engine life. Windows 1,500 hours of use, give or take. Beyond that, start counting the days. Here's a fringe thought. There's a theory that combustion engines resonate with us so deeply, not just because they're powerful, but because they mirror us. They breathe. They get hot. They wear down. They scream when pushed too hard. They die if you neglect them. They demand care, fuel, rest, and when they're gone, they leave behind only heat and sound, just like us. Engineers still argue whether combustion is dead. EVs are faster, cleaner, quieter. They don't lose energy to heat in the same wasteful way. They don't vibrate or burn oil or blow gaskets. They don't really die. They just fade. But what they gain in perfection, they lose in poetry. Because entropy gives engines character. You lie there now. The hum of your fan low and slow. You feel warm, not from heat, but from memory. You've been in a dozen machines tonight. Some screamed, some hissed, some whispered, but all of them decayed. And that decay, it mattered. It gave them soul. The best engines, the ones you remember, the ones you dream about, aren't the cleanest or most efficient. They're the ones that flirted with failure, that ran hot, that knocked once, but held on, that shook under throttle, like a beast fighting chains, that reminded you what it meant to use something up completely. You don't admire them because they lasted forever. You admire them because they tried, despite knowing they couldn't. So maybe that's the true meaning of speed. Not escaping time, but burning through it, leaving behind heat, motion, and a noise no one forgets. And maybe that's why you love engines. Because in a world obsessed with longevity, they remind you how beautiful it is to wear out doing something spectacular. And now, we slow everything down. You're no longer in a Ferrari, no longer shifting through gears or chasing the red line. The engine has fallen silent, and the heat that once surged through metal and oil now fades gently into the air. Breathe in, soft, slow, even. Feel the quiet weight of everything you've just traveled through, valves and pistons, explosions and silence, heat and motion. It's all behind you now. The machine rests, and so do you. You've walked through the heart of combustion, traced its pulse through aluminum arteries, followed it into turbochargers, exhaust pipes, and the mysteries of thermodynamic law. You've seen what makes the engine scream and what makes it fail. And now, Now, you're still. Let the hum of your fan mimic the soft whir of cooling radiators. Let the air move gently over you, like wind spilling through carbon fiber ducts. Let your body soften, your breath lengthen, your thoughts blur like scenery from a car that's finally eased off the throttle. Because sleep isn't so different from a coast down lap. It's how the system cools, recovers, resets. The engine might sleep forever, but you'll wake up tomorrow with the memory of fire still whispering in your bones. And maybe, just maybe, you'll hear the echo of a V12 downshift in your dreams.